Good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? I hope all of you are keeping yourself safe and healthy. It's a very unusual time. Uh, as you all know that we have to keep inside our homes, and therefore not to bring to you the class. What I thought that we will have interactive lecture series on international humanitarian law. Uh, International humanitarian law, I am happy that most of you have joined this lecture series. Uh, and in your classroom, you might have uh, studied so many different concepts of international humanitarian law. In this class, I am very sure that you might have read about the protected persons. You might have also read about that what is the meaning of armed conflict and what is the meaning of being a combatant, what is the meaning of being a non-combatant, and then who is a civilian, and finally who are protected persons. All these things perhaps you may be knowing, because in the month of January and February these things might have definitely been discussed in your classroom. But today onwards, for at least two classes, I will take on means and methods of warfare. So warfare, I am very sure that you have read many things about warfare, and then who are the combatants and who are non-combatants, who are civilians. But when it comes to the means of warfare, then you will wonder that whether there is any law to restrict the choice of the parties to have any kind of means of warfare or not. Law on the limits of warfare. What are the limits of warfare? So you might be very clear that the parties to warfare, they have been enjoying, or sometimes suppose someone of you may become a military commander tomorrow. Now in that case, you might be just thinking that whether I can take up any arms to defeat my enemy, or whether I can use that very arms in any way which you like. So these are the basic things that you may think of. Or as a common citizen of our country, you may think that suppose if you would be the military commander, then what you will do? Or suppose like as a normal citizen, like if I am sitting in my home and then watching a cricket match, and then I will make a comment that, okay, if I would be in the cricket ground, then I would have scored these many runs. But it is very difficult to actually score the runs in the actual playground. So this is how you see that a person can make any comments, but when it comes to the real, battlefield, and then the whole concept of battlefield is now different. There was a time when there was a battlefield which was different from the areas where civilians were living. But now every inch may become a battlefield. So the concepts are changing every day, and that is how even the means and methods of warfare are changing every day. But the parties to the armed conflict, what they always become happy, they become happy if they acquire new means of warfare. And if you look at the history, then today what we are going to tell you that I'm going to tell you that is there any law to regulate the means and methods of warfare? The answer is yes. And obviously yes, because human being is a unique creation of God. And human being, as a human being, what human being can do very good things, and human beings can do also bad things. And there has been a lot of the civilization has struggled to distinguish between what is good and what is bad. And therefore, in every civilization, good people have sometimes collected together, and they have tried to regulate even those times which is a bad time and which is a time of warfare, when people fight for supremacy and people fight for some region and then try to win over. So in that situation, if and in that scenario, what is happening, that the tempers are also running high, emotions are also running very high. So in that situation, the question is that whether there can be any limitation. The answer is again yes, because in those times of emotions running high, there is even more important need to have laws which can restrain the person. Otherwise, I said that human being is a unique creation of God, and sometimes human being have those kind of tendencies by which they can destroy themselves. So that is how the efforts of humanity have been. And your teacher of international humanitarian law might have told you that how in the modern times, although in the ancient or medieval times also there have been many efforts. Like in ancient times, we have the great stories of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and there are many battles during ancient India. There were many battles during medieval India. There were most of those examples, because the examples of war are never very good. But even then, sometimes some examples have become exemplaries. And those examples have set the background for today's evolution and codification of international humanitarian law. And in the modern times, therefore, if your teacher might have told you that what are the basic conventions that you have to study, you have to study Geneva Conventions, because those are the conventions of modern times. You have to study additional protocols to Geneva Conventions. And then you have to study the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court. So if you look at these very basic international instruments, you'll find that these instruments have very clearly now codified the rules on limits which can be set on use of any kind of weapons. So let us see that what are those rules? What are the rules in Geneva Conventions? And how these Geneva Conventions have incorporated those rules, right? So how is more important initially, and then I will come on to what are the things in Geneva Conventions. So first of all, I will tell you about how these things have come into the whole corpus juris of Geneva Conventions or international humanitarian law. First of all, I will tell you that if you look at the warfares of modern times, the warfares of modern times have been fought by using different kinds of weapons. Some weapon may be might have used. Some party to the conflict might have used poisonous gas weapons. Sometimes the parties to the conflict might have used weapons which may be chemical, because science. Thank you. So
So I think you have the option to mute everyone.
all right.
I
Yeah.
think you have the option to mute and unmute everyone. So with that, like you can mute everyone in the group.
Okay. Yeah, I am just looking at that. Yeah. Just thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Welcome.
Can you tell me where is it? Yeah, there may be somewhere. I think I'm just looking.
So it must be there in the option settings. Like
Yeah. In the audio, perhaps.
you are the host. Since you are the unmute.
Yeah, yeah. So I might have control. Thank you. Just one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, now I have found it. Yeah, now it's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Nandini, for saying that. Yeah,
Welcome, sir.
yeah. So what I was telling you that Geneva Conventions are very important for our study. And what I was telling you that during the times of warfare, parties to the conflict, they can whether they can use any kind of weapons or not. And I have been giving you examples of ancient India, of medieval India, and modern India. And then I was telling you that if you look at the whole world, also you'll find different kinds of weapons being used. Uh, if you look at the warfare techniques, sometimes some party to the conflict have used chemical weapons, sometimes they have used, even bacteriological weapons they have used. If you have the current uh, example of the wars which are going on in the whole world, you might have heard that parties to the war, they have used even chemical weapons and bacteriological weapons. And sometimes they have used it against their own population. That is also very surprising. So the question is that whether there is any limit or not, because as a lawyer of tomorrow, you must know that whether there is any law or not. Because suppose if you become an international lawyer, and suppose if you have the chance to go to International Criminal Court and then present your arguments there, then it will not be just enough to say that okay, there are certain examples of conducting the warfare during ancient India, but you are not sure about the existing legal regime. So you must know about the existing legal regime, and if you look at uh, the evolution of uh, this law, this branch of law in international legal regime, you'll find that since 1868 at least, so now it's more than 150 years. So 1857 in India, there was a great time when the first revolt of independence that the whole scene had started. And just after 11 years of 1857, first Indian independence war, what happened that in St. Petersburg in Russia, there was a declaration that was focusing upon the means of warfare, right? That no, it's not that any party can use whatever weapons they will like, but there should be some kind of regulation. And that declaration of 1868 has become a landmark. And thereafter, you see that the new trend which emerged, that trend is called Hague trend. Hague is a famous city in the Netherlands. It is one of the capitals of Netherlands. And if you look at the evolution of the laws which were codified in the Hague, the first important codification on the means of warfare was during 1899, when the first Hague conference was convened. Uh, and that Hague Peace Conference, it is called Peace Conference. So first Hague Peace Conference, in that there were different instruments which were agreed, and one of those instruments that laid down the limits on the warfare. So what I was telling you, that from there, since 1899, again, you might be knowing that in 1907, the Second Hague Peace Conference was convened. And thereafter, you might know that the First World War started in 1914. And after the First World War started in when it came to an end, thereafter again, because in First World War, use of poison that became very widespread, poisonous gas, in fact. So after the First World War was over, then again a new treaty was signed, which said that no, we should stop using this poisonous gas during the armed conflict. So this is how you see that Hague was the city from where the trend started to restrain or to put a limit on the means and methods of war. And that is called, therefore, in international humanitarian law, you might have read somewhere that there are two broad trends. I tell my students of Law Center 2 that Law Center 2, likewise 2. So 2 is, sometimes I say my students that 2 is very close to my heart. And so in international humanitarian law, there are two broad trends. What are those two broad trends? First trend is Geneva trend. So the city in Switzerland, Geneva, there another trend had started. And that trend was that what are the limits on warfare by which we can limit the effect of warfare on the people, right? So therefore you might have read about, whole series of Geneva Conventions. There are 4 Geneva Conventions covering, the effects of warfare on the people, and who are the protected persons, who are the armed persons, who are combatants, who are non-combatants, who are civilians, etc. So these things have been properly, clearly, regulated by the Geneva Conventions. But there was a separate trend which was going on in the city of Hague, and the Hague trend was a little bit on another aspect of international humanitarian law, and that aspect was that means of warfare, whether that is that can be regulated or not. So in the main Geneva Conventions of 1949, this could not be regulated. The means of warfare, the choice of means of warfare on the parties, that was not regulated. But you might have also heard about the protocols, additional protocols to Geneva Conventions. And you might sometimes wonder why additional protocols were needed. Additional protocols were needed to fill up those gaps in the Geneva Conventions. And when additional protocols, those were agreed in 1977, then many new things also came before discussion amongst the parties. And finally, in 1977, these 2 additional protocols, those were concluded and agreed to by the international community. So, although India is not a party to additional protocols, but additional protocol is a very important instrument of international humanitarian law. And we must know about the provisions, because now the Hague law has been incorporated into additional protocol 1, right? Even in additional protocol 2, there is, but I hope all of you might be very clearly knowing that additional protocol 1 relates to international armed conflict, whereas additional protocol 2 relates to the non-international armed conflict. So in any kind of armed conflict, whether it be international or non-international, in any kind of armed conflict, the choice of warfare, the means of warfare, the choice on the means and methods of warfare, that is limited by law. And where you will find the law, the main law is now found in the additional protocols. So first of all, I will let you see some of the provisions of the additional protocol 1, because additional protocol 1 lays down the rules on international armed conflict. So first of all, I will let you know about the first important provision of additional protocol 1, which is the basic rule. And what is the basic rule? That is given in Article 35, 35, Article 35 of Additional Protocol 1, which lays down some of the basic rules of warfare. And what does it say? It says the first rule is that in any armed conflict, the right of the parties to choose methods or means of warfare is not unlimited. This is the basic rule, right? So what I was discussing, now that has been incorporated in law, that the choice is not unlimited. It means choice is limited. Then the second rule in Article 35 says that it is prohibited to employ weapons, projectiles, and material of such nature which causes superfluous or unnecessary suffering. Now, this is a very important principle. So, Article 35 lays down some of the basic principles of means and methods of warfare. So, the second part of Article 35 says that no weapon should be employed by the party to a conflict which causes either of these two things. First one was which causes superfluous injury. Injury can be of different types. You are all in second year, and in first year itself you might have read many things about different kinds of injuries in Indian Penal Code. And therefore I am not going into the definition of injury, etc. What I am saying that Article 35 of Additional Protocol 1 says that the injury must not be superfluous. But you might not have heard about superfluous injury. You might have heard about different kinds of injuries, but superfluous injury is a concept which is used in international humanitarian law. What is that superfluous injury? Means that injury which was not needed. It means that in warfare there is a reason. There are reasons to a country to go to war, and the reason may be different, but one of the reason is only to defeat the other party. That is the reason. The first and foremost the first and foremost objective to go to the war is to defeat the other party, right? So this is the objective, and therefore to fulfill the objective, what the country must do, that country should not use any kind of such weapons which will cause superfluous injury, means an injury which was not needed, or that injury could not give you any kind of help to your military objective, right? So unnecessary, and the second is unnecessary suffering. Now, suffering but unnecessary, it's very difficult to define. However, this is a principle. This is the first principle or second principle, that there must not be causation of unnecessary suffering. So how this unnecessary suffering, you will come to know unnecessary suffering, because if you look at therefore I have given you so many examples, that if you look at the history of civilization of human being, you will find that human beings have used different kinds of weapons by which people, sometimes they would use such kind of bullets which could expand if it would go into your body. If you, after piercing your body, it will expand. So the whole objective was that it will cause too much injury to the body of the enemy, so that it will take a little bit less time to defeat them. And likewise, sometimes even fires were used, use of fire as a means of warfare. And if you look at the examples in India, and the famous philosopher Chanakya had said sometimes, if you read that Arthashastra, if you read, you'll find that Chanakya had said that no, fire should not be used as a means of warfare. So these are the oldest examples, and therefore the Hague Trend. What is the Hague Trend, and what is now in the Additional Protocol 1? Additional Protocol 1 also says unnecessary suffering. If you use fire, what will happen that people, not only people, but also many other living beings, they will be killed. And people will die because of, a region which was not important region for fulfillment of the military objective. So what I am telling you, that the second important principle of the means of warfare, the law is, important principle of law is that no weapon, no such weapon be used in the warfare which causes unnecessary suffering, right? And then the third principle is, again, this is a basic principle. So there are three principles. Faculty of Law, I tell my students that we have three centers. So you must remember that there are three basic principles of IHL, that branch of IHL which deals with the methods of, or the means of warfare. What are those three basic principles? I told you about two. The third is, which is laid down in Article 35, paragraph 3, which says that it is prohibited to employ those methods which cause widespread, long-term, and severe damage to the natural environment. You see. So there are three words which are used here: widespread, long-term, and severe. So damage can be, you might have read about damage in law of torts as well as in law of contracts in first year. Now the concept of damage is again different in IHL, which says environmental damage, and not only any kind of environmental damage, but environmental damage which is widespread, which is severe, and which is also long term. Now these, if the effect is such, then this is prohibited. If you use any kind of weapon by which you will cause damage to the environment which is widespread, which is long term, and which is causing severe damage. So what you will have to understand, that these are the three basic principles of the means of warfare. And then if you understand these three basic principles, then I will also tell you that, suppose, and therefore in that context, first of all, I must tell you that if party to the conflict acquires a new weapon, or during the times of warfare, or even without the times of warfare, the countries, they are always financing their industrialists, or maybe industrialists all over the world, that that they will be trying to get new weapons at the earliest, right? What we call sophisticated weapons, what we call advanced weapons, what we call weapons which are not possessed by anyone in the whole world, So this is the kind of, कहते हैं ना, जो एक होड़ लग जाती है कि नहीं हमें ये चाहिए, like that. So this kind of situation is there in the world even today, when we talk of having such peacetime and living in an ideal world, but countries are financing these kinds of probable scenarios of future. So what I was telling you, that suppose if a country is trying to invest in a project where they are going to acquire a new weapon, so is there any law which says anything about the prospective new weapon which is going to be acquired by a country? The answer is yes. And Article 36 incorporates that future scene, or that future probable kind of scenario where a country would acquire a weapon, and then they will say, okay, now I have acquired the weapon, and then there is no law. But there is law. Article 36 says about that very specific situation. And Article 36 clearly says about, the title of Article 36 is new weapons. And you know what? It says that in the study, development, acquisition, or adoption of a new weapon, means or methods of warfare, a country is under an obligation to determine whether its employment would be prohibited by this protocol or by any other rule of international law applicable to the country. So what does it mean? It means that this, whatever these three principles that we have read in Article 35, those three principles will also be applicable on prospective new weapons. So if you are going to acquire a weapon which will cause severe damage to the environment, long-term excessive damage to the environment, you must not go for that. As a leader of tomorrow, suppose if you, someone of you will become the great leader of our country, and then suppose if you think that no, I have to win a war, and then you will invest money in a very grand project. Now, but you should be reminded at that moment of time about IHL, which says that any weapon which causes such kind of things, those weapons cannot be used, right? And you will be a responsible leader of the country. And therefore, as a responsible leader of the country, today as a responsible student of Law Center 2, or today as a responsible student of the whole faculty of law, because I am sure that students from other centers have also joined today. So as a responsible citizen of the country, you must know that what kind of weapons be used. So what Article 36 says, that the three principles: any weapon should not cause unnecessary suffering, any weapon should not cause what we call that superfluous injury, and uh, any weapon should not cause what we call environmental damage. So these are the three basic principles of warfare on the means and methods. And then if you have any question till now, please ask by unmuting yourself. And if you have no questions, then I will move on, because I think I am very clear that please.
I have a question.
Okay. Yeah, Nandini, tell me.
Yes, sir. So my question is in the relevant current aspect regarding COVID-19 pandemic. So
Yes.
I was visiting the site ICRC, which is International Committee for Red Cross.
Yes.
So what I was reading there was that this COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented in recent history and is spreading rapidly.
Yes.
So it is no longer just a public health crisis. It has come under humanitarian law crisis as well. So, sir,
Okay.
can you please elaborate a bit more on its current humanitarian aspect, how it's falling under that law, and how it will be affecting countries? Because it has affected almost every country. So, how it will further go from here?
Actually, again, this is a debatable thing, because first of all, we must be very clear that whether it is
Right, sir.
whether it is a situation of warfare or not, uh, because
Because yes, sir. Because it is being termed as a biological weapon also by some countries, like Italy and US have already filed some cases telling it that it's
because
being
anybody
used as
can
a
file a
biological.
case. Yes, anybody can file a case anywhere, and it depends upon the jurisdictions. Like I have heard also that many people have filed case in Bihar, some cases have been filed somewhere else in our own country, and I have also heard that
Right, sir.
you said that some suits have been filed elsewhere in the world. But the thing is that first of all, we must know
Right,
that
sir.
has any country declared war? The answer is no. Uh,
No, war has not been declared.
yes, and suppose some country will just allege that okay, this is a warfare. But then you will have to prove, because nobody will believe you. This is just a kind of
Yeah, right, sir. So how do you? So, sir, how is it proven that it's a warfare
yeah.
under HRL?
Yeah, so warfare, this is not a class of telling you about the definition of warfare, but I will tell you that
Okay, sir.
warfare means that either it is a declared war or it is undeclared war. Sometimes
Okay.
today in our times, no country declares war, because war is illegal now,
Right, sir.
right? So,
Right, sir.
yeah, so no country declares war, and in that situation, what happens that a country uses their armed force. So unless and
Hello.
until hello.
Sir, I have a question. I just missed the name of the first principal. I joined late, a bit late. The name of the first principal was
Uh, yeah, so the name of the first principle was not to cause superfluous injury.
superfluous. Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, sir, is it not humanitarian crisis? Won't we term it as a humanitarian loss?
You see, humanitarian crisis is a different thing, but what I am saying that this IHL will be only applicable when there is a armed conflict. No canon of IHL will be applicable if there is no armed conflict. Whether there is armed conflict as of now, the answer is no.
No, sir.
Yeah, so that is why we should be, as a student of IHL, we must be very clear on the canons of existing law. Some, it is always,
Okay.
people will blame some other country, or some people will blame, or somebody will take political mileage out of the whole situation, and they will put the blame on others.
Right,
But the
sir.
thing is that this is a threat to the whole humanity. Nobody knows till now, at least. Maybe that there will be a time when somebody will know that who causes what and who caused what. But the thing is, as of now, is
Right, sir.
that uh, that as of now is that nobody knows that whether this is a warfare, or perhaps today, as far as I am of the opinion that there is no such situation of warfare.
All right,
Sir,
sir.
I have
Thank you
one
so much,
question.
sir.
Yes,
Hello.
yes, please.
Sir,
Hello.
sir, what are the repercussions of violating Protocol 1? I mean, because when countries acquire nuclear weapons, that clearly violate the subclause B and C of Article 35 of Protocol 1. So, what are the repercussions of violating Protocol 1?
So let us first of all understand the principles, and then we will move on to the implementation, and then I will move on to the enforcement also.
Sir, you just talk about Article 35 and 36. There to choose not to choose unlimited warfares.
Not to choose what?
Hello.
Yes.
So not to choose unlimited warfares. It means, sir, is this trying to create a level playing field for a war? It means someone will not use the such kind of weapons who can be uh, environmental degradation for a long term widespread. What it does mean?
Yeah, so no, you must again try to understand that what I said, that there is no law which says that no, you should not acquire any weapon. No, you are free to acquire any weapon. Yeah, because warfare, because this is the whole branch of law which only deals with the situation of warfare. So this will not ever say that no, no country will acquire any weapon at all cost. What is it says? Article 36 of AP1 says that whenever you are going to acquire a new weapon, you must keep in your mind three considerations. First consideration must be that weapon in question must not cause superfluous injury. The weapon in question must not cause unnecessary suffering. The weapon in question must not be causing severe damage, widespread damage, or a damage which is long term on the environment. So these are the three things which are important. And thereafter you can acquire any weapon. All right, Raj?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, yeah, so moving further, what I am going to tell you that apart from these three basic rules that we have studied, the next important thing to know about this limit of the choice on the means and methods of warfare is that whenever you use a weapon, and there have been long practice about it, whenever you use a weapon, or a country uses the weapon, or the combatants use the weapons, they must ensure that civilians should not be attacked. You see, because civilians, they do not, this is the beauty of international humanitarian law, that international humanitarian law lays down the basic principle that whenever there is a warfare, you must distinguish between combatants and civilians. This is the principle of distinction, what we call. So this principle of distinction also is applicable on the weapons. That whenever you acquire new weapons or whenever you have to use any weapons, suppose someone of you, I tell my students that suppose someone of you are going to appear for an interview to become a lieutenant of army. Then this is a real situation which they give you. That they will give you a situation, and then they will say that, okay, plan it. How will you achieve your target? So this is how you see you have to solve it. So this will be a kind of puzzle. You may be playing puzzles every day, but if you want to become even a officer in the defense forces of our country, then you will be given at the time of SSB, you'll be given this kind of puzzles. You see. So these puzzles solve a very important objective. And what is the objective? That objective is that whenever you plan any attack, that planning is very important. And what will you think whenever you planned it? You will plan that accordingly, that no civilian will be targeted. Why? Because the whole purpose is that you have to win the war. You don't have to cause enmity, and that enmity is always, it's kind of jan janmantar wala. This kind of, the whole people will be getting annoyed because, so just a small objective was there, and that objective was to win the war, and that's it. But therefore, the whole
Sir?
Hello.
Sir, in modern time, what are the basic feature of a war?
There are many basic features. Yeah. So, what aspect of basic feature you are asking?
Sir, I mean to say that if you are saying this should not be done, that should not be done, then sir, what type of war we